Yom Tov. The holiday of Shavuot has Yizkor on the second day, just like the other holidays like Pesach, Sukkot, and Yom Kippur also have Yizkor on the last day of the Chag, of the holiday. And of course, because we're not able to congregate in shul, I think that many people are having Yizkor the day before the holiday. And I'd like to speak about Yizkor and some of the customs, and hopefully there's some meaning there for us on a personal level. One of the customs of Yizkor is not to say Yizkor for someone who passed away if you're in the first year of mourning. And some people think that that's a mistake, that actually the custom should be that you should say Yizkor right away. But I've seen a reason associated with that, which is that because somebody's in the first year of mourning and they're still sad, they're going to mourn loudly and maybe cry and disturb other people. That's one reason that's given. I'd like to offer two other possible reasons. One reason might be very similar to what we just said, that in the first year, you're still sad, and it will bring you to tears, or certainly more so in the first year than other years. And we know that the whole idea of Yizkor is actually really strange, because on a holiday, generally we're supposed to have simcha, we're supposed to be happy. And therefore, if you have any type of other day which is somewhat of a chag, somewhat of a happy day, you're not allowed to say things like the El Malei Rachmim, the prayer for the dead, the memorial prayer for the dead. But here with Yizkor, we do say that, and even though it's on a holiday, how is that possible? So I think a possible answer would be that we don't want to be sad on this day. And therefore, if you're saying Yizkor for someone who passed away in the first year, you're going to be sad, and it's not appropriate. So therefore, we don't do it on the first year. A third possibility, which I think might have a lesson for us, is what the nature of Yizkor really is, and really the idea of memory. Yizkor means to remember. And of course, we're asking God to remember the souls of the departed, and we make the El Malei Rachmim, we make a prayer for the dead. But perhaps it has to do with us and how we remember the person who deceased. And generally, Yizkor could be said for any relative, but the custom is only to say Yizkor if you're saying it at least for one of your parents, and then you could extend it and say for other people. And it's no difference really who you're remembering, but we all have memories, and I've talked about this in the past, we all have many memories of someone who passed away. We remember them, for example, a parent when they were young or when we were young. We remember them growing up. We remember them in their old age. We have many, many different memories of them. And the question is, which memories do we choose to create the picture that we want for our memories? In other words, how do we want to remember that person? We could remember them in their totality, but generally speaking, you'll probably notice that most people pick out certain events, certain attributes, certain parts of the person's personality that they remember. And that's how they stitch together the picture of what that person, the deceased person, was. And I'll talk from a personal point of view. I just had the sad event happen to us in our family that my father-in-law passed away from COVID-19. And I know my father-in-law for many years, and I know him as both a husband, as a father, as a father-in-law, and I also knew him as a teacher. He was a teacher for many years. He taught both English and driver's ed in the local high school in Boston. And when I met my father-in-law, he was already the last couple of years before he retired, and he didn't really appreciate teaching anymore as much as he did in the early years. But then I read Facebook comments from people who had him as a teacher in the 70s, perhaps also in the 80s. And I saw that my father-in-law was really very close to all of his students. He related to them, and that's probably why in his later years, when he was older and the students were much younger, he didn't have that same cultural references in common with them, and perhaps didn't relate to them as much. But in the early years, he did have that. And most of these comments were, he was the best teacher I ever had. He made English literature come alive. He had a sense of humor. And all of a sudden, a part of my father that I knew, but I didn't perhaps focus on and emphasize, became alive. And I read those and I read them again, and I started realizing that now I have a different way of creating a picture of my father-in-law who passed away just a few weeks ago. And I'm starting to sort of embed that in my mind. And we do that with everything we have. I know that a lot of my siblings got together and talking about how they grew up, and everybody had a different impression of whether it was my father or my mother or what the family was like. Why? Because one was a teenager, one might have been young, one might have been married at certain stages in life, and parents, of course, react differently to different children under different circumstances. And it turns out that each one of them had a different perspective. They remembered my father who's still alive, but remembered my mother who passed away in a different way. And they have different pictures. And the pictures become stronger and stronger as you go over them time and time again. We know that it's even possible to create false memories. There were studies done where a woman psychologist tried to create false memories in her child, and she was able to do it. If you tell the story enough times, that memory becomes real to that child, but even to an adult. If you remember something in a certain way and you repeat it, and you want to remember that, you want to remember them in a good light. You don't necessarily want to remember the harmful things that someone did to you, but rather you want to remember the pleasant moments. You want to remember those personality traits which was something we could learn from. So therefore, we have to constantly be working on our memories and reconstructing our memories. And perhaps going back to the question, maybe that's why we don't say Yizkor in the first year. In the first year, we're still sad. In the first year, we're still mourning. In the first year, if a parent was old, for example, when they passed away, you're going to remember them in their old age. You're going to start creating and constructing those memories in a way which might not be the most positive way. It's much better to wait a year. When the immediacy of mourning and the sadness moves back into the past, you're able to collect the memories from a lifetime. And those memories are happier memories. And therefore, it's more appropriate, as I said before, on the holiday, but it's more appropriate for the memories that we want to construct. The legacy that we want to create for our parents, for those loved ones that passed away, is much better done when we could do it with a sort of, not so much besimcha, not so much with happiness, but without that overriding sadness and mourningfulness that we have in the first year. So hopefully we take that away with us, and we could make sure that we remember. And then when we pray, we're thinking, and pray for the memory of those people, we're thinking about certain attributes which really help us and help us grow to be better human beings. And hopefully we take that away, and then the Yom Tov becomes one of simcha, of happiness, of joy. The fact that we had that experience for all those years to live with someone who gave us all of these positive memories that we want to take on with us for many, many years to come. Good Yom Tov.